bringing you every single Dodgers update right here on this channel every single day. The offseason market is heating up fast, and we're right in the thick of it. Let's jump straight into the Miguel $5.5 million deal. This will be Rojas's final year as an active player, but here's the really important part. Rojas will remain with the organization beyond 2025 in the player development department. It's huge. This tells us everything we need to know about why he was taking his time. He was legitimately contemplating retirement. When you come off winning a World Series, especially back-to-back championships, you start thinking about going out on top. But then you also think about the chance to three-peat, to make history, to be part of something only two other teams have ever accomplished. That's going to make anyone pause and really weigh their options. What ultimately sealed the deal was the Dodgers offering him that player development role. Knowing he'd stay with the organization regardless of whether he played or not was the final piece that helped him make his decision. And honestly, the opportunity to chase a three-peat was probably a massive driver in him choosing to come back for one more year. We also have to remember what Shohei Ohtani said to him after that Game 5 home run. Miguel talked about this a few days after it happened. He said after he hit that homer, Shohei was up next and popped out to left field for the second out. When Shohei came back to the dugout, Miguel was by the bat rack putting away his helmet, and Shohei told him straight up, "You cannot retire next year. You're playing with me for 10 more years." That definitely had an impact on Miguel's thinking. Seeing how much he's loved in Los Angeles, how clutch he's been for this team, knowing everybody wanted him back, getting to have a proper retirement tour where he gets to soak in the love from the fan base all season long, that regardless of how he performs on the field, we're going to show him nothing but appreciation all year because of everything he's done for this organization. And technically, Shohei is getting his wish because Miguel will be staying with the team for the foreseeable future in that player development role. So even after he hangs up his cleats, he'll still be around Ohtani and the rest of the guys helping develop the next generation of Dodgers. When you look at Miguel's stats, the culture and leadership he brings is honestly more valuable than his on-field production at this point. But the Dodgers are still going to give him opportunities to contribute because he's earned that. What stands out most about his game now is his defense more than his offense. His offense has had clutch moments, obviously, but defensively, he's still rock solid. Last year, he played pretty much second base, third base, and shortstop. He started 49 games at second, 28 at third, 27 at short, pitched in 4 games, and even played 1 game at first base. He's a true utility guy. And at 36 years old, the experience he brings is invaluable, not just for what he does on the field, but for teaching the younger players who are joining this roster over the next few seasons. He gets 1 more year as an active player to show guys the ropes in real time, and then he transitions. What he did in Game 5, that moment alone deserves a retirement tour, one of the most legendary moments in Dodgers history during the best World Series in baseball history. Miguel Rojas completely changed the trajectory of that game and this franchise. We cannot forget that. His fielding is what really stood out in the postseason. That diving play against the Phillies, the awareness on the double play in Game 6, all of it showed why he's still so valuable defensively. And that's going to continue this culture shift into next season, no matter who the new players are or what moves the Dodgers make in free agency. Having legendary players with legendary moments like Miguel on the roster exemplifies what this Dodgers culture is all about and sets the tone for anyone who joins this team. Even beyond the culture aspect, Miguel's going to be an incredible backup option. We saw how useful he was last year playing every infield position. Whether Hee-Sung Kim ends up being the everyday second baseman or not is still to be determined. Free agency is in full swing, and there are still big names on the market. But having Miguel as an option at second, third, short, wherever you need him in his final season is extremely valuable. Fielding skills don't leave a player the way hitting skills can. His glove is still elite. So Miguel Rojas being here gives the Dodgers another year before some of those younger prospects who aren't quite ready yet make their way up to the big leagues. I absolutely love this Miguel Rojas signing. We all knew it was going to happen eventually. The question was just when. And now we have some insight into why there was a delay. Before we move on, I want to know what you guys think about this signing in the comments below. How big of an impact do you think Miguel Rojas will have on the 2025 Dodgers? And I don't just mean statistically, I mean the culture, the leadership, everything intangible he brings. I truly believe he's an incredible person to have around this team, and that's why the Dodgers trust him enough to move him into player development. There's a hidden value to this signing that goes way beyond what shows up in the box score. Drop your thoughts in the comments because I really want to hear what you think. Now let's shift to something else that caught my attention. Dave Roberts made a really interesting comment about the future of Major League Baseball. He said he'd be fine with an MLB salary cap as long as there's also a salary floor. His exact quote was, "If you're going to suppress spending at the top, you have to raise the floor to make those bottom feeders spend money too." That's such an important point that doesn't get discussed nearly enough. When people talk about spending in baseball, they always focus on teams at the top like the Dodgers, Mets, and Yankees. But what about the teams at the bottom that are barely spending anything? You have organizations down there spending maybe $40 or $50 million total on payroll compared to teams spending that much on a single player. That's insane. It's insane that you can be such a cheap owner that your team isn't putting fans in seats and you're not investing any money into building a competitive roster. So having a salary floor is way more important than having a cap, in my opinion. A floor forces cheap owners to actually try. We know you can find incredible players on low contracts who end up being superstars. A salary floor would push teams to be more active and competitive instead of just pocketing revenue-sharing money. It's not the Dodgers' fault if a salary cap gets implemented. People love to blame big spending teams, but the real problem is owners at the bottom who refuse to invest in their product. If there's ever a cap, there absolutely has to be a floor to balance it out. Let me know what you think about that in the comments. One more quick thing before we wrap up. If you haven't already, you need to go follow Katie Woo on Twitter and The Athletic. She was formerly covering the St. Louis Cardinals and has now joined the Dodgers beat writing staff. Huge congratulations to her. She's an incredible reporter and writer. If you want all your Dodgers news and analysis, definitely follow her on X and check out her work on The Athletic if you have a subscription. She's going to be a great addition to Dodgers coverage. And, of course, we're covering everything Dodgers right here on the channel as well. That's everything I've got for you in this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you have an amazing day, and let's go Dodgers. What's going on, Dodgers fans? This is the news you've been waiting for, and trust me, it's worth getting hyped about. I'm Jim Rodriguez, and you're tuning in to Dodgers Latest on this Thursday, and I cannot thank you enough for being here. The subscriber count keeps climbing, the views keep rolling in, and that's all because of you. So keep smashing that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, share this with your fellow Dodger fans, and let's keep this momentum going. The algorithm loves engagement, and so do we. You can always hit me up on X and Instagram at JRodShow, and right here in the comments on Dodgers Latest. We read every single one and try to respond to as many as possible because you're what makes this channel special. Now let's get into the massive news that dropped late Wednesday night. The Dodgers have officially brought back Miguel Rojas on a one-year, $5 million deal. That's right, the World Series hero is returning to LA for what will be his final season in professional baseball. Rojas is going to be 37 years old in February, and after this upcoming season, he's hanging up the cleats. But here's the really cool part. The Dodgers have already set him up with a front office position in player development once he retires. He's going to stay in the organization helping mentor the next generation of Dodgers, and honestly, that's exactly where a guy like Miguel Rojas belongs. Let's talk about what he brings to this team beyond just being a roster spot. Rojas has been such an important mentor, especially to Mookie Betts when Mookie made that transition to shortstop. Miguel played second, short, and third for the Dodgers last season and was actually a finalist for the utility Gold Glove in the National League. His defensive versatility is incredible, but when you think about Miguel Rojas and what he means to this franchise, your mind immediately goes to Game 5 of the World Series. What he did in the 9th inning of that game might be the single greatest inning any Dodger has ever had in October. Top of the 9th, he crushes a home run off Jeff Hoffman to tie the game and bring the Dodgers back from the dead. Then in the bottom of the 9th, playing second base, he makes that stumbling, staggering throw to home plate to cut down Isaiah Kiner-Falefa and keep the game tied, forcing extra innings. Without that inning, there's no World Series championship. Without Miguel Rojas, this dynasty doesn't exist. People have legitimately debated whether that home run is the greatest in Dodgers history. Now look, Kirk Gibson's walk-off in the '88 World Series is iconic. Freddie Freeman's walk-off grand slam in Game 1 this year was unbelievable. But what Miguel Rojas did in that moment, coming off the bench after not starting in over a month, not getting a hit in over a month, and delivering in the biggest spot imaginable, that's top three. You don't have to get ready. I tell my kids that all the time, and Miguel Rojas lives that mentality. We gave him some grief about the Van Cleef and Arpels necklaces and bracelets he wears, but you know what? That man has done more business for that jewelry company and for the Dodgers brand than anyone could have imagined. And now getting him back on a one-year deal is huge because he fills a real need at second base. We've been talking about how second base is kind of a question mark right now with Tommy Edman, and Hyun-Sung Kim expected to share time there. Adding Miguel Rojas gives you veteran leadership, defensive excellence, and someone who can play short and third as well. His presence in that clubhouse cannot be overstated. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Miguel Rojas is going to be a manager someday. He could absolutely manage the Dodgers down the line. Dave Roberts has mentioned he might call it a career after 2029, so the timing could work out perfectly. Miguel staying in the organization through player development keeps him in the game and gives him that pathway to coaching and eventually managing. He's Venezuelan, he speaks Spanish, and we've seen him give advice to Shohei Ohtani despite the language barrier because the language of baseball is universal. Getting one of the good guys like Miguel Rojas back for his final season is fantastic for this organization. It's one thing for a manager or coach to teach you the game, someone who used to play and is telling you how it's done. It's a completely different thing when a current player, someone who's in the trenches with you every single day, in the batting cage, the clubhouse, on the field, when that guy is teaching you, that carries so much more weight. Miguel Rojas is essentially another coach on this roster, and you cannot put a price tag on that kind of leadership. Bringing him back for $5.5 million is an absolute steal, and keeping him in the organization long-term is smart business. Now let's shift gears to something that's got people talking. Is Teoscar Hernandez on the trading block? There are reports out there suggesting the Dodgers might be open to moving him, and with the winter meetings coming up in Orlando in just a few days, this could actually happen. Here's the thing. Teoscar is in that sweet spot contract-wise where he becomes very tradable. He just turned 33 years old and has 2 years left on his 3-year, $66 million deal with the Dodgers. He's making $12 million in 2025, $14.5 million in 2026, and there's a $15 million option for 2027 with a $6.5 million buyout. Some of that money is deferred, but the point is he's affordable and under team control, which makes him attractive in trade discussions. You can't argue with what Teoscar has done for this team. He's been a clubhouse leader, made a huge impact in his first year, hitting 33 homers and driving in 99 runs. Last season, he hit 25 homers with 89 RBIs, and over the last 2 postseasons, he's hit 8 home runs. The Dodgers have won the World Series both years he's been here, and he's been a great ambassador in the clubhouse, just like Miguel Rojas. There's no coincidence that when the Dodgers win, they've got a great clubhouse culture without a lot of drama or bad attitudes. That's why when you're talking about trades and free agents, you don't want to upset that chemistry. The devil you know versus the devil you don't. Do you really want to bring in guys who might not fit that culture? Maybe that's why Andrew Friedman takes so long making moves and sometimes doesn't pull the trigger at all. But here's the reality. If you were going to trade Teoscar Hernandez, Cleveland would make perfect sense. He'd join Jose Ramirez in the middle of that lineup, and the Dodgers would get Steven Kwan back in return. That would solve multiple problems. Kwan plays left field. You move Andy Pages to right field. Tommy Edman can play some center. And you've got Hyun-Sung and Rojas handling second base with maybe another acquisition in the mix. I'm not saying I want to trade Teoscar, but let's be honest about the situation. Teoscar in right field is not a good defensive option right now. He's struggled out there dropping balls and not getting to others. He's not a right fielder anymore at this stage of his career. Maybe he's better suited for left field or DH, but the Dodgers are seriously looking at not starting the season with Teoscar in right. Hopefully he stays and plays left, or maybe they find a trade partner where he can thrive. But the possibility of Teoscar Hernandez being on the trading block is very real. So who would the Dodgers target if they make a move? One name that keeps popping up is Brendan Donovan from the Cardinals. We talked about him at the trade deadline, and now he's back on the Dodgers' radar. The Cardinals are in full rebuild mode and looking to move pieces. There's also been talk about Lars Nootbaar, who was teammates with Shohei Ohtani on Team Japan in the World Baseball Classic. But let's focus on Donovan. He can play second base, shortstop, and left field. He actually won a Gold Glove in 2022, so he's proven defensively. He's got some pop in his bat, averaging about 10 home runs a year over the last 4 seasons. Last year, he hit .287 with 10 homers and 50 RBIs in 118 games. Here's what makes Donovan so attractive. He's under team control for the next 3 seasons, meaning he can't become a free agent. That's gold in today's baseball landscape. Just like having a player under contract for a couple of years makes them attractive in trades, acquiring someone like Donovan who's under team control is incredibly valuable. And that's why we've talked about Jason Dominguez and Steven Kwan, who are under contract. Donovan can't hit free agency for 3 years. He's only making about $5 million through arbitration, and he fits that Dodgers mold of multi-positional Swiss Army knife players. He can play left field, second base, and shortstop. Maybe he splits time at second with Rojas and Edman, while Edman also plays some center field if the Dodgers move Teoscar. Pages would shift to right field, and suddenly you've got a really flexible roster. The rumor I've been hearing is that the Dodgers might flip Hee-Seong Kim to the Cardinals for Brendan Donovan. That would be interesting because it raises the question of whether the Dodgers really believe Kim has a future here. He played about 70 games last year and didn't really get a chance to establish himself. The Dodgers seemed to think the game was too fast for him early on, which is why he started the year in the minors. He even played some outfield in the minors to try and find a roster spot. Eventually, he came up and played infield. But if they're willing to trade him for Donovan, that tells you they're not convinced he's part of the long-term plan. Donovan is a left-handed bat who could play every day in left field or fill that second base need if the big names like Dominguez and Kwan fall through. It's a fascinating situation as we head into the winter meetings in Orlando. Now, I want to bring in a comment from one of you because you're what makes this show work. Someone wrote that the Dodgers' strategy has never been to jump into the mud wrestling pit with 20 other GMs fighting over the same players. Their practice is to go carefully and quietly after a handful of guys they know will fit the team and actually improve it. They pointed out that the Dodgers whiffed on Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates in the bullpen last year, so they don't think Friedman is going to just throw money at people and expect it to work out. If a big name is wanted by enough teams that only money will land him, Friedman is going to look long and hard at recent physicals before making a move. I completely agree with that take. That's been the maddening part of Andrew Friedman's approach, especially at trade deadlines where we don't get big splashes, just small ripples. Last year they got Jack Flaherty at the deadline, but I think the biggest move was actually acquiring Ben Kasparius from Tampa Bay. Kasparius ended up playing a huge role as Freddie Freeman's backup when Freddie dealt with injuries, and the Dodgers non-tendered him after the season, hoping to sneak him through waivers and re-sign him cheaper, but Cincinnati immediately claimed him. That was a roster shuffle move that backfired because the Reds got themselves a good player. Anyway, the point is, the Dodgers operate differently than most teams. They're not penny pinching, but they're strategic about where they spend and who they target. We're heading into an interesting winter meetings period starting December 9th in Orlando. Everyone's watching to see where Kyle Tucker lands, where Cody Bellinger ends up, and what smaller moves teams make. Everything I'm reading suggests it's going to be less about free agency and more about trades for the Dodgers as they try to fill those spots in left field and second base. Will it be Kwan? Will it be Dominguez? Will it be Brendan Donovan? We'll find out soon enough. What we do know is that Miguel Rojas is back, which is fantastic news. And hopefully Teoscar Hernandez finds his spot with the Dodgers because he's been a huge contributor to these back-to-back championships. You've been a massive contributor to Dodgers Latest, and I appreciate every single one of you. Remember to hit me up on X and Instagram at JRodShow and keep those comments coming. Smash that like button, share this video, subscribe if you haven't, and tell your friends about the channel. I'm Jim Rodriguez. The weekend is almost here, and hopefully the Dodgers are doing their homework in preparation for Orlando. As always, it's time for Dodger baseball. What's happening, Dodgers fans? Welcome back. I've got something today that honestly caught me completely off guard, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of you too. We're talking about a development that just surfaced within the last few hours, something that could fundamentally alter how we think about the Dodgers infield moving forward. The front office has been incredibly active this offseason, and while everyone's been focused on pitching and the usual big-name targets, they've apparently been working on something entirely different behind the scenes, something nobody saw coming. Before we get into the details, do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already, because we're covering everything Dodgers related here, and I don't want you missing a single update. All right, let's get right into this because it's a big one. The Dodgers are making a serious push for an international player, but this time it's not coming from Japan like everyone expected. It's not another high-profile free agent from MLB. This one's coming from the Korean Baseball Organization, and according to multiple reports, including analysis from Doug McCain over at Dodgers Nation, the team is officially linked to third baseman Hee-seong Kim from the Kiwoom Heroes. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Who? And that's exactly the point. This is the kind of move that flies completely under the radar for most people, but it's vintage Dodgers front office strategy. Find productive, disciplined players who are putting up consistent numbers. Get them before the market realizes their value, and do it at a price point that makes sense for long-term roster construction. Kim was posted to the international transfer system back on November 20th, which means he's officially available to MLB teams. And here's where it gets really interesting. According to the reporting that McCain referenced, the Dodgers apparently prefer Kim over two much more hyped Japanese stars, Munetaka Murakami and Kazuma Okamoto. Both of those guys have been connected to multiple MLB franchises this offseason. Both are considered elite talents with massive upside, and both would generate way more headlines if the Dodgers signed them. So why would LA prefer a 29-year-old from Korea instead? The answer is actually pretty straightforward when you break it down. He fits their current structure better, both financially and roster. Let me give you some context on who this player actually is. Kim was the captain of the Kiwoom Heroes this past season, and he just put together an absolutely stellar year. He hit .315 with 26 home runs and 90 RBIs. Those aren't fluky numbers either. Over 9 seasons in the KBO, he's posted a career batting average of .284 with 454 RBIs and 80 home runs. That's consistency. That's a track record of production year after year. And at 29 years old, he's in this perfect window where he's young enough to give you several productive years, but experienced enough that he should be able to adjust to MLB relatively quickly without needing a lengthy development period. Now let's talk about the financial side of this, because it's a massive part of why this makes sense for the Dodgers. Murakami is projected to command a contract somewhere in the neighborhood of $90 million. That's a significant investment, especially for a team that's already carrying multiple massive contracts on the books. Kim, on the other hand, is expected to land a deal worth around $12.5 million. Let me say that again. $12.5 million versus $90 million. That's not just a difference. That's a canyon. For an organization that's trying to balance sustained championship contention with financial flexibility, especially with potential luxury tax implications and the new CBA negotiations coming up, that gap is enormous. You're talking about adding a productive, proven player at a fraction of the cost of the bigger names everyone's chasing. McCain made a joke that this rumor might only be worth one Dodger dog in terms of reliability, but he also admitted it sparked a legitimate and necessary conversation about the team's future at third base, and that conversation is unavoidable at this point. Max Muncy is already past 35 years old. Miguel Rojas is approaching 36. Both of them are still valuable contributors. Both bring leadership and experience to the clubhouse, But the reality of professional sports is that Father Time is undefeated. The Dodgers know they need to start planning for the future, do it in a way that doesn't sacrifice their ability to compete right now, while also setting themselves up for sustained success down the road. This is where Kim becomes such an intriguing option. His playing profile checks a lot of boxes that the Dodgers value. He's left-handed but hits right-handed, which gives him a unique type of versatility that coaching staffs love. He can play multiple infield positions, which is critical for a team that prioritizes defensive flexibility and roster depth. And his offensive production over the last couple of years suggests he's not just a stopgap solution. He's someone who could legitimately step in and be a productive everyday player in the big leagues relatively quickly. The Dodgers have an incredibly strong track record when it comes to developing international talent and helping players make the transition to MLB. If they believe Kim can make that jump, that carries a lot of weight. Here's the thing that adds urgency to all of this. The signing window for Kim runs until December 21st. That's coming up fast. According to the Associated Press and multiple other outlets, if no team signs him by that deadline, he goes back to Korea for another year. So the Dodgers know the clock is ticking. They know other teams might enter the race once word gets out about his availability and his price point. And based on how this front office operates, they rarely let a player who fits their technical and financial profile slip away without making a serious push. This isn't just a name on a long list of possibilities. This feels like a genuine target, someone they've identified as a potential solution to a real roster need. So the big question becomes, is Hee-Seong Kim actually the answer at third base moving forward? Can he be a long-term replacement for Max Muncy? And how does he compare to the bigger names like Murakami and Okamoto, who have dominated the headlines? Here's my take. The numbers suggest he has the tools to succeed. A .315 batting average with 26 homers and 90 RBIs in the KBO is legitimate production. The consistency over 9 seasons shows this isn't a one-year fluke. The fact that he was team captain suggests he has leadership qualities and the kind of makeup that translates well to a veteran clubhouse. And the price point makes it a relatively low-risk, high-reward type of move. If it works out, you found a cost-controlled everyday player who can anchor third base for the next several years. If it doesn't, you haven't mortgaged the future or tied up massive amounts of payroll in a player who isn't producing. The comparison to Murakami is interesting because on paper, Murakami has more raw talent and more upside. He's younger, he's got more power, and he's been the face of a franchise in Japan for years. But he's also going to cost 7 or 8 times as much as Kim, and there's no guarantee that his production translates seamlessly to MLB. We've seen Japanese stars come over and struggle with the adjustment. We've seen guys who absolutely rake in NPB and then take a year or two to figure out big league pitching. With Kim, you're getting a guy who's a bit older, but also more affordable, which gives you flexibility to address other needs without handcuffing yourself financially. And if the Dodgers truly prefer him over Murakami, that tells you they've done their homework. This front office doesn't make decisions lightly, especially when it comes to international signings. I also think it's worth noting that the Dodgers have had mixed results with Korean position players in the past. Ha-Seong Kim came over and never really seemed to fully earn the trust of the coaching staff. He made the postseason roster. He was part of the World Series team, but he never got consistent high leverage opportunities. So there's a reasonable question about whether the organization believes they can develop Korean hitters more effectively now, or if they're willing to take another chance based on the specific profile and production of this particular player. But the fact that they're seriously pursuing him suggests they feel confident in their ability to help him make the transition. For a team that's won 2 consecutive World Series and 3 championships since 2020, the mission is crystal clear. You don't rest on your laurels. You continue evolving, you continue finding value in places other teams aren't looking, and you stay ahead of the curve. Hee-Seong Kim might be exactly that kind of player, an underrated piece with the potential to contribute at a high level while fitting into the broader financial structure the team is trying to maintain. The Dodgers aren't just trying to win next year, they're trying to sustain this window for as long as possible. And that requires smart, balanced, present competitiveness with future flexibility. So here's what I want to know from you. What do you think about this possibility? Would Hee-Seong Kim be a strong long-term replacement for Max Muncy? Do you trust him to step in as early as 2026 and be productive? And how do you compare his value to someone like Murakami or Okamoto, who have way more name recognition but come with significantly higher price tags? I genuinely want to hear your thoughts on this because it's a fascinating debate. Drop your comments below. I read every single one of them, and I try to respond to as many as I can. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss an update. We're going to be all over this story as it develops, especially with that December 21st deadline coming up fast. Thanks for watching, and as always, go Dodgers. Look, I need you to pay close attention right now because what I'm about to share with you could legitimately reshape the entire landscape of Major League Baseball heading into next season. Jeff Passan just published something that has the entire baseball world buzzing, and if you're a Dodgers fan, you need to understand exactly what this means for your team's championship aspirations. We're talking about a potential trade scenario that would be seismic, the kind of move that doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it changes everything. Before we get too deep into this, do me a huge favor and smash that like button. Hit subscribe if you haven't already because we're building something special here. It's momentum rolling. Drop your thoughts in the comments as we go through this because I genuinely want to know what you're thinking. All right, let's dive in. So ESPN just published Jeff Passan's list of the top 25 players who could be traded this offseason. Now, I want to be clear about something right from the start. This isn't a ranking of who's most likely to be traded versus least likely. This is a ranking of the 25 best players who are potentially available, ranked from best to worst in terms of talent and impact. When it comes to Baseball Insiders, Jeff Passan is the absolute gold standard. I've reached the point where I don't really care what John Morosi says, what Bob Nightingale reports, or even what John Heyman tweets, unless Jeff Passan confirms it or reports it himself. That's not a knock on those other guys, but Passan has sources at the highest levels, and when he puts his name on something, you can take it to the bank. So when he publishes a list like this, especially with the winter meetings coming up, it's worth taking seriously. And guess who's sitting at number one on that list? Tarik Skubal. That's right, the Detroit Tigers ace, the guy who just won back-to-back American League Cy Young Awards, the first pitcher to do that in the AL since the late 90s. We're talking about an elite, dominant, generational pitching talent who's entering his prime years at just 30 years old. The fact that he's even on this list, let alone at the top of it, tells you everything you need to know about where things stand between him and the Tigers organization. This isn't some speculative rumor or hot take from a random blogger. This is Jeff Passan saying that Tarik Skubal is the best player who could realistically be moved this offseason. Let that sink in for a second. Now, the obvious question is, why would Detroit even consider trading him? And that's where things get really interesting. Matthew Corey reported a while back that during extension talks between the Tigers and Skubal, Detroit's offer came in at less than $80 million over 4 years. Let me say that again. Less than $80 million over 4 years for a back-to-back Cy Young winner who's 30 years old and absolutely dominant. That's not just a lowball offer. That's borderline insulting. When you look at what starting pitchers are getting paid on the open market right now, when you consider what Skubal has accomplished over the last 2 seasons, that offer is nowhere close to market value. According to the reporting, that left the two sides somewhere in the neighborhood of $320 million apart in their valuations. That's not a negotiation gap you can bridge with a few phone calls. That's a fundamental disconnect about what this player is worth. So naturally, when that news broke, it sparked immediate speculation about whether the Tigers would consider trading him. But here's where it gets complicated. Detroit publicly maintains that they have no intention of moving Skubal. They're saying all the right things about how he's their cornerstone, how they plan to contend next year, how important he is to their future. And to be fair, those things are all true. Tarik Skubal is an incredible pitcher. Last season, he posted a 2.21 ERA, a whip under .9, struck out 241 batters. in 195 innings, allowed only 18 home runs, and gave up just 6.5 hits per 9 innings. Those aren't just good numbers, those are elite, historically great numbers. You can argue all you want about how competitive the American League Cy Young race was, but Skubal was clearly the best pitcher in that league. He was better than Garrett Crochet, better than everyone else who got votes. It wasn't close when you actually break down the metrics. The Tigers came within a few outs of reaching the American League Championship Series last year. They're a young team on the rise, and Skubal is the centerpiece of that entire operation. So from their perspective, why would you trade the best player on your roster when you're trying to build a contender? That's the logic they're operating under publicly. But here's what Jeff Passan is reporting, and this is critical. Despite several executives around the league believing Skubal will be moved, the Tigers have shown no signs of deviating from their stance that he's staying in Detroit. He's a free agent after the 2026 season. Contract extension talks have gone nowhere. And while Detroit says he's not available, the reality is that his trade value will never be higher than it is right now. Think about this from a purely business standpoint. Skubal just turned 30. His value is at an absolute peak. If the Tigers trade him now, they can get a haul of young, controllable talent that sets them up for sustained success over the next 5 to 7 years. If they hold on to him, they're betting that they can compete next year, that he stays healthy, that he maintains this elite level of performance, and that they can either sign him to an extension they clearly can't afford or aren't willing to pay, or they lose him in free agency after next season for nothing more than draft pick compensation. That's an enormous gamble. And if things don't go according to plan next year, if they're not contending by the trade deadline, his value drops significantly because teams are only getting him for a playoff push rather than a full season plus playoffs. So while Detroit is saying he's not available, Jeff Passan is reporting that executives around baseball believe there's a real chance he gets moved. And that brings us to the Dodgers. Passan outlined the top landing spots for Skubal if he does become available, and the Dodgers are right near the top of that list. The Mets are the team to watch most closely, which makes sense given Steve Cohen's willingness to spend and their desire to build a championship roster immediately. But right behind them are the Dodgers, followed by the Orioles, Yankees, Red Sox, and Giants, all contending teams with deep farm systems and the financial resources to make a deal happen. Now, here's where I want to address something head on. Do the Dodgers actually need Tarik Skubal? On paper, their rotation is already loaded. Yoshinobu Yamamoto just won World Series MVP and looks like a future perennial Cy Young candidate. Blake Snell was fantastic when healthy and gives them another ace-level arm. Shohei Ohtani is the best player on planet Earth and will be back on the mound. There's still uncertainty around Tyler Glasnow and whether he gets traded, but as of right now, he's on the roster. You've got young guys like Gavin Stone and River Ryan who are expected to be ready for spring training. And, of course, there's the Roki Sasaki situation that could add another elite international arm. This is a deep, talented rotation, even without adding anyone else. But here's my answer to that question. Yes, the Dodgers absolutely should pursue Tarik Skubal if he becomes available. Why? Because depth matters, because injuries happen, because you can never have too much pitching, especially elite pitching. The Dodgers dealt with a ton of rotation injuries last season. They managed to overcome it and win a championship, but they also caught some breaks along the way. You can't count on that kind of fortune every single year. If you're serious about a three-peat, if you want to maximize this window while Shohei is in his prime and Yamamoto is ascending, you add elite talent wherever you can find it. Skubal isn't just an upgrade, he's insurance. He's the kind of pitcher who can anchor a postseason rotation and give you a legitimate ace-level start in a Game 7. And let me show you something that really drives home how special this guy is. If you go look at Skubal's Baseball Savant page, it's legitimately one of the most impressive profiles you'll ever see for a starting pitcher. Almost every single metric is in the red or dark red, meaning he's in the elite 95th percentile or higher across the board. The only categories where he's around the 50th percentile are things like extension, which is basically a useless metric anyway, and ground ball percentage and barrel percentage. And honestly, Those metrics don't even matter that much in his case because hitters don't make solid contact against him frequently enough for it to be a real concern. When you're throwing as hard as he does with the kind of movement and command he has, and when batters are constantly swinging and missing or making weak contact, who cares if the occasional barrel goes a long way? It's not happening often enough to hurt you. This is an elite pitcher by every meaningful measure. So here's what I want to know from you, and I'm genuinely curious about this. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being least likely and 10 being most likely, what do you think the odds are that Tarik Skubal actually gets traded this offseason? For me personally, I'd put it around a 4 right now, maybe creeping up toward a 5. I think Detroit genuinely wants to keep him and compete next year. But I also think that if extension talks stay completely stalled, if they keep getting offers from teams that blow them away, and if they start doing the math on potentially losing him for nothing in free agency, that number could climb in a hurry. There's just too much value on the table to ignore. If I'm running the Tigers and I know I'm $200 or $300 million apart from Skubal on an extension, I'm at least listening to what teams are offering. I'm exploring what kind of package I could get back. Because if you can land 3 or 4 elite prospects who are controllable for the next 6 years, that might be better for your long-term competitive window than 1 more year of Skubal followed by watching him sign a massive deal with someone else. From the Dodgers' perspective, they have the assets to make this happen. Their farm system is still strong despite all the promotions and trades over the last few years. They have the financial flexibility to absorb Skubal's contract for next season and potentially extend him if they want to go that route. And they have the organizational infrastructure to support another elite arm and help him thrive in a high-pressure environment. If they can acquire him without completely gutting the farm system, without giving up untouchable pieces, it's absolutely worth exploring. You don't pass on opportunities to add generational talent just because your roster is already good. You make it better and figure out the depth chart later. But there's one final point that Jeff Passan makes in his report, and I think it's worth discussing. He asks how long Skubal, who just turned 30, can keep this level of performance up. It's a fair question. Pitchers are volatile. We've seen guys fall off seemingly overnight. Injuries happen, stuff diminishes, the league makes adjustments. I personally don't think that's going to happen to Skubal anytime soon. His track record suggests he's durable, his arsenal is elite, and he's right in the middle of what should be his prime years. But it is something to consider when you're talking about trading significant assets or committing major money to a long-term extension. For the Dodgers, the calculus might be simpler. Trade for him, ride him for a championship push in 2026, and then reassess when he hits free agency, especially with the new CBA negotiations looming in 2027 that could fundamentally change the financial landscape of the sport. Look, I don't know if this trade is actually going to happen. Detroit could very well hold firm and run it back with Skubal for another year. But the fact that Jeff Passan is reporting this, the fact that executives around the league believe he's gettable, and the fact that the Dodgers are being mentioned as a serious contender, that's significant. This would be a franchise-altering move. It would give them another legitimate ace to pair with Yamamoto and Ohtani. It would provide crucial depth and insurance against injuries. And it would send a clear message to the rest of baseball that the Dodgers aren't satisfied with one championship. They're building a dynasty. We'll keep you updated as this story develops because this is one you absolutely need to follow. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Would you want to see Skubal in Dodger blue? What would you be willing to give up to make it happen? Let me know. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that button and let's keep growing this community together. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. You know what's wild? I just got done reading Jeff Passan's latest piece, and I'm sitting here trying to process what this could mean for the Dodgers heading into next season. We're talking about one of those scenarios that doesn't come around very often, the kind of opportunity that could redefine an entire franchise's trajectory for the next half-decade. Passan just released his list of the top 25 players who could potentially be moved this offseason, and sitting right there at number 1 is Tarik Skubal. Not number 5, not buried somewhere in the middle, but number 1 with a bullet, the reigning back-to-back American League Cy Young winner, a guy who just turned 30 and is pitching at an absolutely elite level. And according to multiple sources, the Dodgers are being mentioned as one of the serious contenders if Detroit actually decides to pull the trigger on a trade. Before we go any further, I need you to smash that like button and subscribe to help us hit 12,000 subscribers. Your support keeps this channel going, and I genuinely appreciate every single one of you watching right now. Let me start by saying something important about Jeff Passan. When it comes to baseball insiders, there's a hierarchy, right? You've got guys like John Morosi, Bob Nightingale, John Heyman, all of them breaking news and throwing stuff out there. Some of it sticks, some of it doesn't. But when Jeff Passan reports something, when his name is attached to a story, that's when I sit up and pay real attention. He's not throwing speculation at the wall to see what sticks. He's connected at the highest levels, and when he says something is happening or could happen, there's serious weight behind it. So the fact that he's listing Skubal as the number one player who could be traded this offseason, that's not just clickbait. That's legitimate intel about what's going on behind closed doors around the league. Now, let's talk about what we actually know regarding Skubal's situation in Detroit. Matthew Corey reported a while back that when the Tigers sat down with Skubal to discuss a contract extension, their offer came in somewhere under $80 million for 4 years. Let me repeat that. Under $80 million for 4 years for a back-to-back Cy Young winner who's 30 years old and in his absolute prime. That's insulting. That's not even in the same universe as what Skubal is worth on the open market. When you look at what starting pitchers are getting paid right now, when you consider that Skubal is arguably the best pitcher in baseball over the last 2 seasons, that offer is a non-starter. According to the reporting, that left the two sides somewhere around $320 million apart in their valuations. That's not a negotiation gap. That's a canyon. And when you're that far apart, it raises serious questions about whether the Tigers are actually committed to keeping him long-term or if they're just going through the motions before exploring trade options. Here's the thing, though. The Tigers aren't exactly coming out and saying they want to trade him. In fact, publicly, they've been pretty consistent in their messaging. They intend to contend next season. They view Skubal as their centerpiece, the guy everything revolves around. And why wouldn't they? He's coming off a season where he posted a 2.21 ERA, a whip under .9, struck out 241 batters in 195 innings, gave up only 18 home runs, and allowed just 6.5 hits per 9 innings. Those aren't just good numbers. Those are historically elite numbers. You can argue all you want about how competitive the American League Cy Young race was, but Skubal was clearly the best pitcher in that league. He was better than Garrett Crochet, better than everyone else who got votes. It wasn't particularly close when you actually dive into the metrics. This is a guy at the absolute peak of his powers, and Detroit would be taking an enormous risk by moving him when they're trying to build a contender. But here's where it gets interesting. Jeff Passan addresses this exact contradiction in his piece. He writes, and I'm paraphrasing here, that despite several executives around the league believing Skubal will be moved, the Tigers have shown no signs of changing their stance that he's staying put in Detroit. They point to the fact that he's their centerpiece, that extension talks have stalled, and that they fully intend to compete again next season after coming so close to reaching the American League Championship Series this past year. All of that sounds great on paper. It's exactly what you'd expect a team to say publicly. But Passan also notes something crucial. Skubal is going to be a free agent after next season. His trade value is at its absolute zenith right now, and if those extension talks truly are going nowhere, the Tigers have to seriously consider whether it makes more sense to cash in now and get a massive return rather than risk losing him for nothing in free agency or watching his value potentially decline. Think about this from Detroit's perspective for a second. Skubal just turned 30. His value will never be higher than it is right this moment. If they trade him now, they could get a package of young, controllable talent that sets them up for sustained success over the next 5 to 7 years. If they hold on to him, they're banking on him staying healthy, maintaining this elite level of performance, and either agreeing to an extension that they clearly can't afford or are unwilling to pay, or they lose him after next season for draft pick compensation. That's a massive gamble. And if next season doesn't go the way they hope, if they're not in contention by the trade deadline, then his trade value drops because teams are only getting him for a potential playoff push rather than a full season plus playoffs. The leverage shifts entirely. So while Detroit is saying all the right things publicly, I think there's a very real scenario where they reassess the situation after the winter meetings, especially if extension talks remain stalled. Passan goes on to outline the teams that would be the best fits for Skubal if he does become available, and guess who's right near the top of that list? The Dodgers. The Mets are listed as the team to watch most closely, which makes sense given their new ownership's willingness to spend and Steve Cohen's desire to build a championship roster. But right behind them are the Dodgers, followed by the Orioles, Yankees, Red Sox, and Giants, all contending teams with deep farm systems who could put together compelling packages. The question for the Dodgers specifically is whether they actually need to make this move. Their rotation right now is already stacked. Yoshinobu Yamamoto just won World Series MVP and looks like he's going to be an ace for years to come. Blake Snell was fantastic when healthy and gives them another frontline starter. Shohei Ohtani is the best player on the planet and will be back on the mound. Tyler Glasnow is still on the roster even though trade rumors persist. You've got young guys like Gavin Stone and River Ryan who should be ready for spring training. And of course, there's the Roki Sasaki situation that could add another elite arm to the mix. So with all that talent already in-house, does it make sense to go out and acquire Tarik Skubal? My answer is absolutely yes. Here's why. Depth matters, durability matters. The Dodgers dealt with a staggering number of injuries to their starting rotation last season. They managed to overcome it and win a championship, but they were also fortunate in how things broke for them in October. You can't count on that level of luck every single year. If they're serious about a three-peat, if they want to maximize this window while Shohei is in his prime and Yamamoto is ascending, then you add elite talent wherever you can find it. Skubal isn't just an upgrade, he's insurance. He's the kind of pitcher who can anchor a postseason rotation and give you a legitimate ace-level performance when everything is on the line. And let me show you something that really drives this home. If you go look at Skubal's Baseball Savant page, it's legitimately one of the most impressive pages you'll ever see for a starting pitcher. Almost everything is red or dark red, meaning he's in the elite 95th percentile or higher across the board. The only areas where he's around the 50th percentile are things like extension, which is basically a useless metric, and ground ball percentage and barrel percentage. And honestly, those don't even matter that much because guys don't make solid contact against him often enough for it to be relevant. When you throw as hard as he does with the kind of movement he generates, and when batters are constantly swinging and missing or making weak contact, who cares if the occasional barrel goes a long way? It's not happening frequently enough to hurt him. This is an elite pitcher in every meaningful sense. So here's my question for you, and I really want to hear your thoughts on this. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being least likely and 10 being most likely, what are the odds that Tarik Skubal actually gets traded this offseason? For me personally, I'd put it around a 4 right now, maybe creeping toward a 5. I think the Tigers genuinely want to keep him and compete next year, but I also think that if those extension talks stay stalled, if they keep getting offers that blow them away, and if they start doing the math on losing him for nothing in free agency, that number could climb quickly. There's just too much value on the table to ignore. If I'm Detroit's front office, and I know that I'm $200 or $300 million apart from Skubal on an extension, I'm at least listening to what teams are offering. I'm exploring what kind of package I could get back. Because if you can land 3 or 4 elite prospects who are controllable for the next 6 years, that might be better for your long-term outlook than 1 more year of Skubal followed by watching him walk. From the Dodgers' perspective, they have the assets to make this happen. Their farm system is still strong despite all the graduations and trades over recent years. They have the payroll flexibility to absorb Skubal's contract for next season and potentially extend him if they want to go that route. And they have the organizational infrastructure to support another elite arm and help him maximize his potential if they can acquire him without gutting the entire farm system, without giving up untouchable major league pieces, then it's absolutely worth exploring. You don't pass up opportunities to add generational talent just because your roster is already good. You make your roster better and worry about the depth chart later. But there's one more thing Passan mentions in his report that I think is worth noting. He asks how long Skubal, who just turned 30, can keep this level of performance up. It's a fair question. Pitchers are volatile. We've seen guys fall off cliffs seemingly overnight. Injuries happen, stuff diminishes, the league adjusts. I don't think that's going to happen to Skubal anytime soon. His track record suggests he's durable, his stuff is electric, and he's entering what should, but it is something to consider when you're committing major money to an extension. For the Dodgers, trade for him, ride him for a championship push next year, and then reassess when he hits free agency after the season, especially with the new collective bargaining agreement negotiations happening in 2027 that could change the entire financial landscape of baseball. Look, I don't know if this trade is actually going to happen. Detroit could very well hold firm and run it back with Skubal for one more year. But the fact that Jeff Passan is reporting this, the fact that executives around the league believe he's gettable, and the fact that the Dodgers are being mentioned as a legitimate suitor, that's enough to get my attention. This would be a franchise-altering move. It would solidify the rotation for a three-peat push. It would give them another bona fide ace to pair with Yamamoto and Ohtani, and it would send a message to the rest of the league that the Dodgers aren't satisfied with just one championship. They want to build a dynasty. We'll keep you updated on everything as this you're going to want to follow closely. Thoughts in the comments.